Hey everybody! Whoa. Hey everybody! My name is Nate Swick, and
Oh,
I am the digital communications manager and the host of the American Birding Podcast here. And I am once again joined by my friend and colleague Greg
Hey
Neise, who is
everybody!
also
Hey
I,
everybody! My name is Nate Swick.
yeah,
And
Greg's got to turn down his
yeah,
volume
you
there.
got to
There we
turn down
go.
your browser
Hey,
volume. All right, now we're ready to go. All right, thanks everybody for joining us on our ABA's various social media channels. We are here as we are every other week to talk about birds, bird ID, anything. You want to talk anything about birds, we're happy to take those questions and answer them to the best of our ability. Because what else have we got to do? We're all stuck here at home as the pandemic ramps up again, and might as well talk about birds to the internet. So welcome.
absolutely.
So if you have any questions or anything, please go ahead and drop those in the comment feed of any of the places you might be watching this. We are excited to chat with you. What I have done, as usual, is I have pulled some images from the ABA's What's This Bird Facebook group. If you're not familiar with that group, it is a crowdsourced bird identification Facebook group. People post photos of birds that they want to identify, and people identify them in that group. And so Greg and I are both admins there, as well as some other folks at the American Birding Association. And we pulled down some interesting photos of what people are seeing. We're going to talk about identifications of those birds, how to identify those birds, what you need to be looking for. And so put those questions in the comments if you have them. We're happy to talk about just about anything that has feathers. Greg, how's birding up in Chicago these days?
It's good, and welcome to the Illinois Birding Network,
Hello,
folks
Illinois.
that are tuned in here. We're having some. Well, first of all, a little kind of housekeeping note here. Earlier this week, I had a kind of a false alarm, and the fireman smashed down part of my fence and gate to get in. And there's somebody building a new gate. So if you hear some power tools or stuff back there, just try to ignore it. The weather here is cuckoo. After what looked like we were going to have winter setting in October, it's now 65 degrees and sunny, and people are out jogging in shorts and tank tops. And the birds are an interesting mix because for instance, we've got a hummingbird now at a feeder. We've had rufous hummingbirds all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping for something better. Now it looks like there's a ruby throat, which is terrifically out of season.
Most of them are gone.
Almost in December. But we've got crossbills and evening grosbeaks flying around and hummingbirds. It's pretty wild November.
Yeah, it's similar down here as well. We had a pretty cold last few days, but things are starting to warm up again. Yeah, I'm in the southeast, so the weather is always kind of, you never know what you're going to get in November. But we're starting to get those winter finches, evening grosbeaks still coming down in increasingly large numbers. Fingers crossed for some other goodies like the crossbills or red poles or things like that. I'm actually looking forward to traveling to the beach in a couple weeks. So if we do this in a couple weeks, I might be from the Outer Banks with my family and just staying at a beach house for a few days. And November is traditionally an extremely good time of year for coastal North Carolina. So I have my fingers crossed that there's going to be some cool stuff out there by the time we are traveling out there. Hello, Mia McPherson, who says hello in the comments. Hello, Jenny Shockley. I know you're out there. Hello to all our regulars. We're excited to get going. Let's see.
Yeah.
Do you want to jump right in?
Let's see here. We got hi Wade, hi Mia. Mia says it's 2020. Everything's weird. Yeah, it's gonna get weirder, folks, and just buckle up. Let's dive right in.
All right, I'm going to throw over to some of the images, and most of these have been ones that have come up in the last couple days. That's usually what we draw from when we put together this little program. I usually just scroll through and look for birds that people have had trouble with, birds that are sort of interesting. And Greg does the same thing. He sent a few of these over my way and made my job a little easier this way. Thank you, Greg. What we have here is a photo from coastal Massachusetts. So what are we looking at? What interests you about this bird?
Well, it's a big bird of prey, and it's got, it doesn't have really long wings compared to the tail. It's hard to tell
Yeah,
exactly
kind of
how
short actually.
bird. Yeah, it doesn't, it's hard to tell exactly how big this bird is.
Yeah.
Can't tell, so there's nothing really to give us size. But it's got a big bill. But the pattern is kind of, the pattern's, unusual. It would certainly make you look at it twice. But some giveaways are just the bird's bulk. This is a big, heavy bird with a big bill.
Yeah, and you can usually see that by some, context clues. We're looking at that log that it's sitting on, that one of those kind of driftwoody logs that you see on the beaches, and that's a big piece of lumber, and that it has to be a big bird sitting on top of it.
And once you get more familiar with them, big birds of prey, like gulls, take multiple years sometimes to get full adult plumage, but particularly eagles, and in particular bald eagles, which is what this is. And this plumage, I believe this would be a second year. It's one of those things that you can look it up in a reference, and I don't remember exactly, but it's in that 2 to 3 year old range. And that sort of masked appearance with the white belly is really distinctive, and there's nothing else that looks like that.
Yeah, and it's not a super common plumage that you tend to come across. And when you think about birds that have multiple ages that take a long time to reach their adult plumage, the plumages that you're going to encounter most often are adult, because that is like 4 years to however long the bird lives. So there's going to be a lot of adult birds out there. Immature, so like very, very first year, because there's a lot of those kind of birds. And if you think of sort of the mortality of young birds, it's usually pretty high. So you're going to have a lot of very young juvenile type birds. And as those birds get older, you're not going to see as many of those sort of second, third, fourth year plumages. So you tend not to encounter those all that often. So you may not see them in field guides all that often, because, by and large, I'd say probably, 75-80% of the birds that you're going to encounter, especially with the bald eagle, are going to be either adults or those first year very brown, chocolatey birds, less so these kind of mottled middle-aged birds.
And this is kind of an anecdotal observation on my part, but I think that these kind of middle birds, these 2 to 3 year old birds, I think they kind of like go rogue a little bit. They don't hang out, with, I think they go off and do their own thing for a couple of years, because you usually see them like this alone. Whereas in the wintertime, you see a lot of eagles at dams and places where they congregate. And this plumage is the one that you see the least.
Yeah, and Mia McPherson notes in the comments, people mix this age of bald eagle up with osprey. Absolutely, yeah, because of that mask, and then the very, the eyebrow, the malar, the kind of chin, mustache kind of area. But that mask obviously stands out. People think of that as an osprey. But if you're looking, oops, I just knocked my mic. If you're looking at, bulk, heft, structure of a bird like this, bald eagle obviously is a very heavy set, thick bird, whereas osprey is longer winged, kind of slighter, skinnier, more lithe, whatever thesaurus word you want to throw out for kind of skinny bird.
Ospreys have really long wings.
Exactly. Yeah, it's another thing you're gonna see. Yeah, so winter tends to be a good time of year to see a lot of bald eagles just about anywhere on the continent, mostly because those birds that breed up in Canada will migrate south and take up on reservoirs. But there's just so many more bald eagles now
I was just
than there were 30 years ago.
It's I say this a lot. When I started birding, bald eagle was a really good bird. I mean, we would, in birders in Chicago in the 70s and early 80s, we would travel to see bald eagles. I live in the urban part of Chicago, and last year bald eagles nested in a cemetery 2.5 miles from my house down the road. It's crazy how much they've exploded. The population has exploded.
They really have. I went through I kind of did a project. Let me back up. Most statewide ornithological societies, statewide bird clubs, produce quarterly journals that have, a list of all the interesting sightings from whatever the most recent season was. And I went through a period where I was gonna put all those old records into eBirds so that we would have them all using kind of a dummy bird account, kind of a general historical accounts. And it was amazing to go into like the bald eagle accounts from like the 70s and the 80s, and people are putting bald eagle sightings in those journals because they are like so notable. And now, I could go to a lake, one of the, any of the larger lakes in my state of North Carolina, and there's multiple pairs every single year nesting there.
Any time in November, well, because they nested so close. I mean, I had eagles flying over my backyard regularly all year long. But now, I sit out in my yard and do hawk watches in the era of COVID, and I've had multiple eagles, bald eagles, flying, migrating over my house. But you want another fun, like what you were talking about, go into the old journals and start looking up records. You want some fun? Do white pelican, American white pelican.
Yeah.
That's a bird whose population has just gone kabloom.
Yeah, especially in the upper Midwest. And what isn't it? Some people think that has to do with the proliferation of like the Asian carp, right?
Oh yeah,
like
that's a theory I put out there about 8 years ago. And if you look at the graphs, and we can talk about this more next time, and I can pull those graphs up. But if you look at the IDNR catches of Asian carp in the pools above the dams on the Mississippi River, and you see the population go up, and then you do the eBird reports, and you see, whoop, they go right together.
Brown belt.
And
that's pretty wild. Let's move on to our next one. We have some questions, and I hope Chris Ortega and I apologize for not remembering the name. We had a couple people that requested specifically for us to talk about gulls, because as we are coming up on gull season, and why we're still in migration, so I don't know if birders are quite desperate enough to start looking at gulls and posting them on What's This Bird. That's usually like a January thing. But we'll talk a little bit about gulls and gull identification, especially in context of this bird, because boy, if we're going to talk about a bird whose population has blown up in North America, this is another great example of that.
And this is a completely different scenario. Whereas, with bald eagles, you can definitely trace their population explosion to the banning of DDT, and the fact that just people are shooting at them a lot less. I think you got to remember with raptors. Like Cooper's hawk is another one that we has had an amazing population explosion, and I think a big part of that is that people are shooting at them less, because they would come and catch chickens and livestock and stuff, and the birds have learned that cities and suburbs are safe havens.
They do really well in cities and suburbs, that is for sure.
Yeah, this bird here that we're looking at is a colonizer. This is an old world species that is taking over. It is moving here on its own accord and doing what it likes.
So this is a photo obviously taken from St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands. So this is in the Caribbean, and if we had shown this picture 10, 12, 15 years ago, that would be like a red letter mega bird for the Caribbean, but now they're increasingly common. This, of course, is lesser blackback gull. I don't want to beat around the bush any more than we have to on this, but lesser blackback gull, as Greg says, it's primarily a Eurasian species of gull, quite similar to herring gull, and in the last 20 years has come over the North Atlantic and colonized on the East Coast, and increasingly, the West Coast and the interior of the continent in the last 10 years or so, to the point where there are times, on the coast of North Carolina when there are places where you can go where they are the most common gull on the beach, which is remarkable to think about. But the things that we want to look at when we're trying to identify this bird. So this is once again one of those kind of middle immature age birds. So like most large white-headed gulls, lesser blackback gull is a 4-year gull. And so this is, what would you call it? This is on the young side.
First cycle. This is the first cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it may be looking at the scapulars and maybe going into second cycle, but for our intents and purposes here, this is a first cycle bird.
Yeah. Pretty modelly on the back, isn't it?
And I mean, what we're seeing here, you can see the all black bill, but look at how attenuated the shape is. Look at how long. Look at how
Yeah.
long the wings are,
Sharp, pointy.
and it's sharp and pointy.
Yeah.
Herring gull is shorter winged in comparison, although all gulls have long wings. But it's shorter winged in comparison. This bird also has a lot of streaking and things going on, not mottling and not even brown color. It's kind of a whitish base with streaking going on around the upper breast. But even in this kind of backlit photograph, notice how the back, the mantle, so that's the wing panel, and the back is what we call the mantle. It's dark. It's giving you a good impression of what this bird might look like as an adult. And we can't see it, but there's the tail pattern is also diagnostic on this.
I think I put the photo. We'll look at that because the next photo is of this bird in flight, and so we can see that a little bit. But yeah,
cool.
the two things I always notice when I see lesser blackback gull are one, that the kind of sharp, pointy, very long-winged, very slender-looking bird, and also it's frequently very smudgy around the eye. So it's usually just about all plumages, especially in the winter, they've got that big kind of smudgy black eye kind of look, which is another thing. But so between those two things, kind of slender look and then the big smudgy eye, you're usually pretty sure that you have a lesser blackback gull in front of you.
Yeah, and gulls are different from a lot of more straightforward birds. I mean, you see a bird with a red bill, like a songbird with a red bill, without digging around. It's northern cardinal and maybe one other thing. So there's a pretty slam dunk field mark there. But gulls is a matter of gestalt. It's a matter of putting. It's the combination of all the parts that make the whole. And you can find a herring gull that's got kind of this and some that's got kind of that, but when you put it all together, they look different.
Yeah. So the critical kind of aspect with gulls, and I will put myself out there as like, I am not an experienced guller. I know kind of my basic gulls. I think birders around the Great Lakes, up where Greg is from, take a natural interest in gulls sometimes, but it is. It's that kind of impression that you get from a bird, and what you do.
Gulling is good for your soul, and do you know why? It is humiliating.
There you go.
You need to be humiliated by a bird every once in a while.
Yeah,
just that you gotta get slapped down.
Yeah. Oh no, it's true. And I think part of the thing about gulls too is that you don't always see them very well. Like a lot of times they can be extremely distant when they're loafing on a distant shore or they're flying way out over the water. And I think that plays a role as well. If you get a good look like this photo, I think you can identify most everything without too much trouble. But it's getting comfortable with your common gulls, getting comfortable with your ring-billed gulls, with your herring gull, with the stuff that you see all the time. And then, we say this all the time with birding, then the unusual stuff is going to stand out. It's going to pop out.
Absolutely.
You're going to notice there's something different about, and you may not be able to quite put your finger on exactly what is different about it, but you'll notice that something is different, and that will cause you to look a little bit closer. And that seems to be the case whenever people find things like California gulls on the East Coast. They're looking through a bunch of ring builds. Something stands out as slightly different, and maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just a variant of a ring-billed gull, but it causes you to practice looking for that stuff, which is really important.
And just you
I'm
mentioned
pull up this
ring-billed
bird in flight real quick.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned ring-billed gull. Ring-billed gull is one of the most variable first cycle birds there is.
Yeah.
The plumage variation in ring-billed gull in the first year of its life, first year and a half, is it's astounding. You could fill a book with all of the
people have
the plumages. I know somebody who's working on it.
Yeah.
So this this is another back up here. So it's another angle of that same bird, obviously. What we see here is look at the primaries and how they're pretty much even. So that let me back up. That dark band, I'm trying to point at the screen and I realize nobody can see that. Don't worry, we'll get there, folks. We're gonna be able to point at stuff soon. But the dark band at the trailing edge of the wing, those are the secondaries. And then the bigger feathers as you get to the outer part of that wing, and I'm talking about the distal wing, the wing that's furthest away from us. You'll notice how it's kind of the same even brown color all the way through to the pretty much to the wing tip, which is the very outer feathers are darker, of course. But herring gull, those 4 or 5, yeah, right where Nate's pointing there, but further in, but those 3 to 5 feathers in the inner primaries, which we can see really well in herring gull, are paler, and it makes like a pale window in the wing that stands out. You can also notice that this bird has a pale rump and a dark band on the end of the tail, which herring gull does not usually show, although sometimes it can. But when you get a herring gull that's patterned like that, yeah, those are the inner primaries there that Nate is pointing to. And when you get a bird that's a herring gull that's got a tail pattern similar to this, it'll have the white or the pale inner primaries, and usually some other things to give it away.
And I'm just struck by the kind of long-wingedness look of this bird, the dark on the mantle, even though it's a first-year bird, like it is darker. Herring gulls are unique, are entirely very variable. They can run the gamut from extremely pale, washed-out birds to extremely dark, kind of chocolatey birds. But this one, the difference between the mantle, as Greg pointed out, and the rest of the bird is pretty stark. And and just long-winged, long dark wings. I mean, that's lesser blackback gull. I have some other gull. I mean, I hope you've had enough of your gull. You'll not get enough of gull. People ask for gull, you're going to get gulls. Be careful
That's
what
right.
you ask for. Here's a composite that Greg threw to me that tells the difference between the 2 blackback gulls and a sandwich tern. If you need help.
Yeah,
the difference between a sandwich
tern. Telling great blackback gull from sandwich tern is an underappreciated ID conundrum, and you'll notice right away the leg color. Now we need some sound effects too. But look at the difference in bulk between these birds. I mean, great blackback gull is massive.
Yeah.
And if you saw these birds,
hawk size, people don't realize it. Like, it's the size of a red-tailed hawk. It's a big bird.
If you saw these birds, I composited these birds quickly in Photoshop to show plumage and bulk variances without showing the actual size. If they were actually standing next to each other, the lesser blackback gull on the left would be a third smaller.
Yeah. I
mean, it would stand, the top of its head would be at the shoulders of the great blackback gull. But look at that massive bill, the big, heavy bulkiness of it. And also the great blackback gull has this big blocky head with a little beady eye.
Yeah.
And once you get eye placement and stuff like that in gulls is really nuanced, but once you kind of tune into it, you get like a whole thing of white heads and they're all standing there and you can't see the backs very well. If you focus on the eye placement and things like that, the head shape, the unusual gull will stand out.
Yeah, it's one of those things that certainly sounds more subtle than it actually is in reality, right? So, the difference in it will kind of express itself as almost like a difference of expression. It will express itself as sort of a different feeling. We talked a lot about how Cooper's hawk and sharp-shinned hawk Coopers can look fierce and sharp-shinned hawk can look kind of baffled. It's a similar sort of thing with like great blackback gull, lesser blackback gull, glaucous gull, which is sort of almost notorious with this little tiny eye that's high up on the head that makes it look kind of simple. I don't know.
Yeah, well, look at these. Look at these two. I mean, the lesser blackback gull on the left looks just kind of friendly and out there looking for garbage, and the great blackback gull on the right is going to eat your chihuahua.
Yeah.
And
it will too.
It will too. Tyler Hodges says, never enough gulls. My brother.
You'll notice on What's This Bird, if you follow that group, it's usually around late January and February that people start getting really into gulls because they're getting tired of all the rest of the winter birds. And like, oh, I guess I have to do gulls now. Carl Bendorf says if someone turns up late, they might wonder how to tell Nate and Greg apart, if this is about how to tell Nate and Greg apart.
ABA board member Carl Bendorf and king of the dad jokes.
Yeah. We'll have Greg mock up a composite of him and I.
Yeah, there we go.
Although I will say the bearded bird person, the bearded bird guy is a bit of a stereotype, a right stereotype. Correct.
I have to dye my facial hair and lose the glasses to make it more difficult.
Right. Here's another composite that Greg showed. These are two herring gulls, and this is a really cool image. Greg, tell me share what you want to tell us about this one.
Let me pop this up so I can see it. I've been just gabbing here and not looking. Okay, so this is two herring gulls. I believe they're a mated pair. But the only difference is the angle that they are to the sun, to the light source. And you can see how different the color and tone of the mantle is. And those are color swatches from Photoshop pulled out to show that difference. So
gulls are like raptors in that the females are much larger than the males. Is that correct?
No, it's the other way around.
Other way around. Yeah.
Yeah. The males are larger. But when you get into nuance, like if you start looking in the books, you'll see that Mew gull has a darker mantle than ring-billed gull and things like that among the grays, and especially when you get into the different flavors of Iceland gull. All of that stuff is subjective and dependent upon the light. I've got a picture. I couldn't pull it up fast enough to give it to Nate for this one, but I've got a picture of a lesser blackback gull sitting in. It's kind of backlit, but there's a lot of light bouncing around because it's in a harbor, and the mantle color looks close to this herring gull on the right.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. And those sorts of birds, people sometimes want them turn into like yellow-legged gull or something like that. Because
and then I've got another
adult lesserback gulls have yellow legs, obviously.
Yep. And then I've got another picture of the same bird just standing up and turning, and it's an obvious lesser blackback gull.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny. That happens in North Carolina, like as I said, because we have so many lesser blackback gulls anymore, and people are, sort of looking for those more unusual gulls, like lesser, like yellow-legged. We actually had to take one off the North Carolina checklist not all that long ago because now this was back before lesser backs were super common in North Carolina, and it was sort of people were perhaps more looking for yellow-legged. And now that we have this whole 25 years of data that shows that lesser backs have been increasing, it's probably that bird that people thought was a yellow-legged was actually Grailsea, which is the Western European subspecies of lesserback, probably one of the earlier ones to show up in the southeast. So,
well, I remember, I think it was 1979, whenever the white-winged tern showed up in Delaware. We did a death march in Virginia. I forget what it was. I think it was Chincoteague. We did a death march out to the beach, and it was like 5 or 6 miles each way for the chance to see a lesser blackback gull. And then in 1980, I saw the first record of it in Illinois in April of 1980. And now, if we drove up and down the lakefront today, Nate, I could probably show you a dozen of them.
Yeah. Oh no, like Cape Point, there are dozens at Cape Point and on Cape Hatteras National Seashore. It is unbelievable how quickly that bird has taken on. All right, so enough gulls. I hope that you have had your fill of gulls. If you want to learn more about gulls, I'm sure that we will be touching on them as we go. Throughout the winter, they tend to increase as the winter goes on. Questions about gulls. As always, I'm Nate. I am joined by Greg. If you have any questions about birds, bird ID, any of that stuff, please leave them in the comments. We're keeping an eye on all the places where people might be contacting us, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have about any sort of bird ID, bird whatever questions that you have. So we'll take them on. Otherwise, I'll move on to some of the What's This Bird stuff. This is
yeah. Well, Adam Sell asks if we're going to talk about immature hummingbirds out east, and he's sort of jabbing me because we're discussing a bird right here that I may have nailed and may have boffed, but whatever. But yeah, hummingbirds. This appears to be a really good year for vagrant
Yeah,
hummingbirds.
we've already seen a lot of vagrant hummingbirds in the southeast and then around the Great Lakes as well. Excuse me.
Yeah.
We had buff-bellied already in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's right.
Number of rufous already taking up their places all across the Carolinas. I saw Ohio had their first record of black-chinned hummingbird. I think there was a calliope somewhere up in that vicinity. Anna's hummingbird in Indiana. It's keep your hummingbird feeders up. You never know what you're going to get.
And just, as long as we're, we got lots of time.
Nothing but time.
As long as we're having a afternoon here full of tangents, you mentioned rufous hummingbird. Mm-hmm. That is another species that has had an amazing expansion in the past 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And the working theory on that is really cool. And the store Wild Birds Unlimited has a big part to play in it. But hummingbird feeders in this time have become more and more popular, and it's become incredibly popular for people to have hummingbird feeders along the Gulf Coast in their backyards. And vagrant rufous hummingbirds have found this new, over the course of decades, have found this new food source that's reliable, and have now, there's like a whole new little subpopulation of rufous hummingbirds that winters on the Gulf Coast from Florida to Texas and around now going up into your neck of the woods, Nate.
Yeah.
That just they weren't there 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, they get several of them, and who knows how many of them are Allens too, because they can't come out and band every single one. I think someone Tennessee had an Allens this week as well, so they are there. We do have a question from Periscope from @WritingRouge. We are seeing groups of trumpeter swans. When is migration period over? Never.
Never.
Never. There's always birds moving.
Trumpeter swans. Groups of trumpeter swans. They must be in the upper Midwest.
Yeah.
Trumpeter swans tend. They're moving around right now. They won't settle in really until things start icing up, and then they'll find places with open water and just kind of settle in for the winter.
Yeah, I'll tell you, around here we have quite a few wintering ducks in the eastern part of the state, and they don't reach their peak numbers till like MLK weekend. I mean, that's usually when most of them are here by, and that's late January. So they're still moving into that time of year.
And a lot of waterfowl, are what we call facultative migrants, and they will only move as far as they need to. So they're not. The other type of migrant is obligate, and that's like most of our wood warblers and a lot of our passerines and things. Those birds fly to South America on a schedule, and you can pretty much, write your calendar by them. But ducks and swans and geese, they'll only move as far as they need to have open water and food source. So if we have a warm winter, there's years where those birds stay north of where we might expect them in a normal winter.
Yeah,
who knows what a normal winter is anymore?
Yeah, who knows if there ever was one. Routing Rouge says they don't see them all year. And in Lake Ontario, Canada, have ice shores. Yeah, I mean that's a great example. If the Great Lakes ice up, then those birds are going to move. But if it's not iced up and they are able to get food, they're going to stay. They're going to stay.
Well,
there.
Lake Ontario, if you're seeing flocks of swans, those are tundra swans. Those aren't trumpeter swans.
All right, there you go.
Trumpeter swans are still quite uncommon to rare east of Lake Erie. And they're even, still a good bird in Lake Erie. I don't know if they're even officially on the Ohio checklist. I think it's one of those species that they're like still on the edge about, but I'd have to look that up.
I've seen them at Biggest Week. Some lingering ones. Yeah. I mean, but
trumpeters?
Trumpeters.
Trumpeters.
Yeah. But
I mean, their range is expanding like crazy.
We're getting them down here now every year among our big flocks of tundra swans. So.
Yeah, and that's talking about range expansion. This is the range expansion episode of What's This Bird Live. Yeah. That's a cool story too, because those birds are all reintroduced mostly along the Mississippi River, released in Iowa and Northwest Illinois and Wisconsin. And when I worked at Lincoln Park Zoo, it was one of the birds that we were breeding and releasing every year. And I got to photograph the release of the last one that was ever released from that project when the project
cool.
was shut down because it was deemed a success and not necessary anymore to raise them in captivity and release them because they're breeding on their own. So that was a very successful program.
Tyler Hodges notes that he gets quite a few trumpeters in the Montezuma region of New York. I'd be willing to bet that is relatively recent too. I mean,
yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah, last 10 years. I threw up the photo here. This is a photo of a passerine dark bird from northeastern Illinois, not far from where you are, Greg.
Yep.
But yeah, what do you think?
Well, it's obviously a dark bird. It's got black legs. It's got a big, thick, conical bill, and that's one of the first things you notice is that big, kind of finch-like bill, and that little white throat, which you might overlook, but that's kind of like a bit of a ringer mark on this bird. And this is a young male brown-headed cowbird.
Yeah, I mean, the white throat, the thick conical bill, the kind of chunky appearance, definitely all say brown-headed cowbird. This is way darker than the ones I typically see, though. That's what I find sort of interesting about this individual.
Well, you can see the black feathering of the, what it will have as an adult, black feathering coming in on the shoulder, the scapula there.
Oh yeah. Even a bit shiny.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another photo from the northeast of a different state, Northeast Florida. I believe that the question that when the person posted it on What's This Bird, they said, "Is this a palm warbler?" And I'll be honest, like I certainly see where that's coming from. This is Florida, and palm warbler is one of the most common overwintering birds in the entire state of Florida. They're literally everywhere, walking around on lawns. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And that this shows the face, especially shows a bit of a palm warbler look with sort of a what appears to be, although I don't necessarily think it actually is, a supercilium, an eyebrow here. But what they're looking at and thinking supercilium, I think is a broken eye ring.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And this is another one, we're going to use that word gestalt again.
Mm-hmm.
When you start putting all the pieces together, the color and tone, the kind of yellowish wash that kind of increases when we get to the undertail coverts, you start putting all those things together and then start knocking off what it could be or what it couldn't be through process of elimination. That's how you reach palm warbler with this bird. Jenny Shockley asks if it's a black-throated blue, I assume female. And well, for one thing, the color and tone is just completely wrong for that species.
Yeah, black-throated blue is a little more brownish, a lot more tan, less yellow tones.
It's got kind of a little dark mask, and it's just, if we put them side by side, you'd notice just how different they are. But this is a bird whose ID you get to by the sum of its parts and then knocking through the
process of elimination. Yeah.
Process of elimination.
Yeah. This is orange-crowned warbler. And now is when you would start to see them arriving in Northeast Florida. They are an extremely late migrant across most of the East. The West is a little bit different. But these birds in the East tend not to arrive in the Southeast until, I usually don't hear about them in North Carolina until late October, mid-October to late October. And they will overwinter across much of the place. I'm sure there's quite a few of them that overwinter in Florida. They're pretty hardy as warblers go. But as Greg says, that sort of round appearance and especially the sort of relatively short wings and tail, the flight feathers on this thing are pretty short, which leads to orange crown as opposed to palm. Palm has a long tail, especially that it flings all over the place, or long undertail coverts that make it kind of look long. They're lanky warblers, just generally speaking, not nearly as round as this one. Shall we move on?
What do we got next here? Yeah.
Here is a sort of poor photo of a water bird from Forsyth North National Wildlife Refuge in New Jersey. I think the rest of the things I have are water birds. Yeah, so we're going to finish up with 3 water birds because water bird migration is really ramping up right now. We're coming into duck fall. But this is an interesting one because I chose this one because it looks like it could be, just looking at it offhand, any one of two different groups of birds. It could either be a cormorant or a grebe. In fact, as I was scrolling through, my first impression was grebe until I paused on it and actually looked at it.
Yeah. And I, this angle with the low body
Yes,
and
exactly.
and kind of compact body, grebes are like all head and neck with this little round body.
Yeah.
Most often, except for the larger couple, like the Western grebe has a longer body, but even that's got a compact body.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have much of a pattern, and all of our grebes except for pied-billed have white cheeks or some sort of a face pattern. This bird doesn't have that, so this is a cormorant.
Yeah.
And looking at, the thing that stands out most on this bird is we can make out the gular patch, and that is the orange throat sac. And it comes away from the corner of the mouth, the gape, sort of straight down. And we can kind of see that the lores, that's the area in front of the eye, between the eye and the bill, they don't look dark. You can see in front of the eye that it's kind of pale. And those two things lead me to call this a double-crested cormorant.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And, status and distribution would suggest that's the case as well. That is
Absolutely.
the default cormorant species in New Jersey,
Although,
and indeed across much of the East. Yes, but yeah, and as Greg says, there is another one that could possibly be down there. A great cormorant is certainly a possibility in New Jersey, but great cormorant tends to be, just bigger and blockier and heavy, and just has like this big rectangular head whenever I see one, and usually a little bit of white somewhere.
Yeah,
on there.
On
the cheek side there.
And when I said what I was sort of leading into there, just because living on Lake Michigan, great cormorant's a bird that just doesn't even enter into my brain, is neotropic cormorant, which is another species well. That is expanding its range like crazy. That's a bird that is taking full advantage of climate change and expanding its range north like nobody's business. And in that species, the area between the eye and the bill is dark, and the gular patch comes off the mouth at a much more acute angle. Much tighter.
Yeah, and certainly, as Greg suggested, I think the issue with this image is the angle, is the kind of foreshortened angle that makes the body look shorter, makes the bill look shorter. If we were seeing this bird at perpendicular, a 90-degree angle in profile, then it would not look as much like a grebe. It would be very long in the body and in the head and bill. So identifying birds from one photo can be a bit of a hairy thing.
That is when you go through the birds in What's This Bird, most of the time they're pretty straightforward, like that lesser blackback gull that we started off with. Very straightforward. It's a textbook photo of a lesser blackback gull. But that's often not the case. And, we say this all the time, identifying birds from one image or two can be very often much more difficult and confusing than seeing the bird in real life. And species that well can throw you way off in one image that's got backlighting, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit here. So anyways, that's identifying these birds from photos can be really hard.
It's similar to identifying birds from a single field mark in some ways.
It is.
All right, so I'll throw up another picture. This is a flock of birds from northern Ohio. So we talked a lot about kind of Great Lakes birds in general this week.
Although this is another bird. It's a common bird across a lot of places. So what do we see here? Oh, they're redheads. Look at that.
Yeah. So it's good that we showed a cormorant before, because this is a bird with a very cormorant-y body shape, kind of long bodied, long build. Some of the differences that you might see here is that they do have a bit more of a difference between the head and the body color. And, when these birds are in flight, they've got that massive white wing patch, which is very distinctive for its group. So we're looking at Water birds, we are looking at one of long, lanky water birds, and I think Merganser is a good place to go on this because of that very thin bill. And so these are red-breasted Mergansers, which are pretty common flocking diving ducks in any sort of large body of water, be it a Great Lake like Lake Erie here, or on the ocean, or any sort of large reservoir.
Yeah, and if common merganser, which is the other species that this might be, the even in a photo that's kind of blurry like this, you would be able to see a very sharp demarcation between the gray body and the kind of rufusy head. It wouldn't be blended like this, but what would give it away is at this angle, even common merganser has a bright white round throat, like oval throat patch in female and young plumages, and it really stands out. And even in an image like this, you would see those little white dots on their chins.
Yeah, the light is actually quite nice in this photo because it's really behind the photographer, so you can see everything really well. And as Greg says, those where I live in the southeast, common merganser is the less common species, although that's not the case in a lot of places in the middle of the country and towards the west. But I mean, this is not an uncommon sight on the coast of the southeast. Big rafts of red-breasted mergansers are pretty common this time of year and moving in. And I got one more. And if you have
okay.
Did I not send it to you? No.
There was one other. No, there was. Yeah, I got it. There was one other I sent you. Of the bird sitting on top of the tombstone.
I missed that.
But
we can save it.
That's fine. So we can talk about this bird while we're.
Yeah, I'll see if I can dig that up. So go ahead and tell me what you think about this thing. This is another water bird that we're going to be seeing a lot of this time of year. Going back to the cormorant, you'll notice that this bird has a lot in common with the cormorant. It's got that long, sinewy neck, and it's got that, from the other picture, what we couldn't see that you would probably be able to see if this were a cormorant. Cormorants have long tails, and this bird has no tail. It's got a compact little body and effectively no tail. But also look at that face pattern. It's got that dark cap and whitish cheeks. This is a grebe. And this is, we'll just cut to the chase. This is a horned grebe in transitioning plumage from breeding to winter. Yeah, this is the sort of plumage that people see this time of year, and it's not always well represented in field guides. It's probably the plumage that you are most likely to mistake this bird for an eared grebe, which is similar in a lot of respects, but it doesn't. But the sort of mottled neck, especially and very messy looking, is actually more of a characteristic of eared grebe in winter plumage than it is horned grebe. Once horned grebes come into their basic plumage, they are pretty clean. Like all of that line right across the eye and down the neck, whereas ear grebes are muddier.
They're darker and messier. They also have a thinner bill that has a little upturn to it, or an apparent upturn. So the upper mandible, upper part of the bill, the maxilla is straight, and the lower part has a little up thing to it, and it gives that and the darkness to it, and an eared grebe is an even more compact bird. It gives a different impression.
Yeah, and the head shape is quite different. That's the forehead is a little straighter, less flat. But I enjoy showing this photo.
The peak of the head is like right on the top. It's like a top knot.
Yeah, I always enjoy whenever these photos show up, which is not uncommon. I enjoy showing them because as I said, this particular plumage, this sort of transition plumage, is not shown very well in field guides frequently, and it can be very variable as well, which doesn't help. But it's going on right now, so be aware of it.
Smith Juan or Juan Smith asks camera settings. I'm not sure what that.
Yeah, we don't know him. Sometimes people will share them in the What's This Bird photos that they share, but frequently they don't, so we don't really have much of an idea. Perhaps he's talking about the red-breasted mergansers that we showed before. I don't know. Pretty high. I bet the shutter speed's pretty high on that one because the wings are kind of frozen real well. I'm going to throw this other photo up real quick. Just bear with me as I insert it into the PowerPoint presentation.
So what Nate is pulling up here is something that I pulled out to talk about, what a single image, how a single image can throw you off. And so what we're going to be looking at here is 2 frames of a male house finch taken seconds apart that I photoshopped together. And the only difference between the 2 images is that there's a chipping sparrow behind the image on the right, and there is no chipping sparrow on the left. But look at what it does to the apparent bill shape. Look at how much that backlighting, that bouncing off the tombstone top, look at how it makes it completely removes the curved culmen, the top of the bill, and makes the bill look so much smaller because the reflection on the top of the bill just blends right in with the background. And so that's just an example of how, a single photo can be very misleading.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've made many mistakes on What's This Bird because of which I will put on the blame of a single photo. But
we were talking earlier about gulls being humbling. Being an admin of that group is one of the most humbling things I've ever experienced.
That's absolutely true. So that is all the photos I have for us today. We're coming up on about 50 minutes now. If anyone has any questions about birds or birding that they would like us to tackle, please leave them in the comments wherever you're watching it, be it on YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, Facebook, all of those things. We're happy to take them. We'll leave a few minutes to do that. And I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about, Greg. I don't know that there's a ton going on with the ABA right now, except that I will take this opportunity to say, if you enjoy these sorts of live free-form bird identification workshops, please consider joining the American Birding Association to help support those. It is at aba.org/join. We have a number of different membership options, including e-memberships if you prefer to get your publications online. We give a number of publications that go out every single year, and also a lot of free resources that you can take part in, even if you're not a member. But if you'd like to support, think of it like as NPR for birds.
There is a lot of stuff
Jenny.
on our website and here on Facebook and in social media that we do. And it's your membership dollars and your support that keeps us going and keeps us doing this kind of stuff and helping you identify birds. And as for new stuff that we've got right now, I just posted a new photo quiz. So if you go to aba.org on the homepage, you'll see a link to the November photo quiz. And I'll be posting that around social media and pretty much right after we get off the air here.
I'll also say that, we do a bird of the year every single year. And if you wanted to join now, then you'd be able to get those cool stickers that we give out with our bird
that's
of the year,
true. And the stickers are really cool.
They are neat. And I would also like to say, a gift membership would be a fine holiday gift to the bird lover in your life.
Absolutely. And we have everything from a digital only, which is where all of the magazines and everything are delivered to you, or you can get access to them via your computer. That starts at $30. That's a cup of coffee a month. If you can buy us a cup of coffee a month, you can be an ABA member, and we'd love to have you for an entire year.
I don't have any. I don't have any questions. I don't see any questions in the comments anywhere.
Thank you, Jenny Shockley.
Yeah. Thank you to all the people who have been following along for, if you followed the whole thing or if you just listened to part of it, we certainly appreciate it. We'll be back in a couple weeks, the week after. Spencer, we have a question. Catching me right before the end.
That's all right.
Spencer England notes, any comment on the tree cut down for the Rockefeller Center that had a saw-whet owl in it? Other than, boy, that's something.
Yeah. I mean,
I'll be.
looking. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, given the fact that saw-whet owls, who are also sort of having a bit of an eruption this year, along with the winter finches, are probably more common than people realize in a lot of those trees. And I was surprised that there was only one, to be completely honest.
Yeah. Well, I looked at the story. There's a news story. Well, there's a lot of news stories about it now, but it showed the tree where it came from, and it was just a lone tree in someone's front yard that they obviously wanted to get rid of anyway for whatever reason. In a suburban setting, and I have to. It's a beautiful tree, and I have to imagine that why ever they wanted that tree down, it probably bothered them as much as anybody to have a tree cut down, because we all love having trees on our property, except when they cause trouble, like the green ash in my backyard, which I love, but it's got to come down. And or else my neighbor is going to really get mad at me when the roots like mess up his garage. But yeah, saw-whet owls are way more common than most people realize. And if you go to again aba.org, and on the front page also, sort of down towards the bottom, there's an essay by me that has a bunch of sound files called Owling for Saw-Whets. And it's the story of how I learned how to find saw-whet owls in the fall and winter. And it was an eye-opening experience. Sort of in a too long didn't read nutshell, I was for years and years and years trying to find saw-whet owls. And then once I learned how to do it, I found 6 or 7 on the first try.
Yeah. Yeah. Jenny Shockley says, no kidding. I think that she might be. Oh, she knows that Len says, I always wonder why it didn't fly out en route. I imagine because when they took it down, they probably wrapped it in some sort of, netting sort of thing to keep the limbs from flying out when it was on the truck going into the city.
Well,
and it couldn't.
I don't know how they do that. I don't know how they do that. They may have wrapped it before they cut it, actually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I imagine that's what happened. But fortunately, the bird was picked up by rehabbers, and it looks like, though it was a little dehydrated, they're going to get it back out, north of the city and release it, which is probably as good as outcome as you could possibly hope for this story. So as he said, saw-whet owls way more common than you think. They don't call much in the winter, and they tend to find the most dense conifers to roost in. So you may walk by them no matter where you are in the lower 48. You may walk by a couple of them without even knowing it.
Grapevine tangles. They love
grapevine
tangles. They get up underneath in there, and though we found in the forest preserves around Chicago where there's no conifers, or very few, that we found them in grapevine tangles and
wow.
in buckthorn, the real heavy buckthorn undergrowth.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of animated movie comes out of this story. It feels like it's tailor-made for that sort of thing. I would like to see one maybe entitled "I'll Be Home for Christmas."
Okay, I gotta go. Thank you all for watching.
The Christmas Carol.
Yeah. All right, it's time to go now. It's time to go.
Home Alone 2: Lost in the City.
Yeah, I'm just gonna hit the leave button.
Yeah,
you can
all right.
Stay on.
We'll see y'all in a couple weeks. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.